I will read the FOIA statement. In compliance with the Freedom of Information Act, notice of this meeting was submitted by fax to the Spartanburg Herald Journal, posted on the bulletin board in the lobby of Town Hall and on the town website. Could we have roll call by the secretary?
Ms. Lemon? Present. Mr. Kennedy?
Present.
Ms. Eastler?
Present.
Ms. Hardy?
Present.
Ms. Pennell?
Present.
Ms. Burke?
Present.
And Mr. Mitchell?
Present.
The minutes were distributed to each member. Are there any corrections? If not, can I get a motion to approve these minutes?
Make a motion.
Second. The vote. All those in favor of the minutes being approved for January 13th, 2025, do so by raising your hands. The minutes are approved. Next on the agenda, Town of Packard zoning ordinance discussion.
We're going to continue our discussion of the zoning ordinance. We got through a good bit the last time, and so there's really not a tremendous amount left in the zoning book. If you would go to page 4-44 towards the very end, I'm going to start with, it's section 4-5.16, group living standards. So these are your group homes. You're required by state law to allow them, but you can't put rules in place. A lot of this is defined by state code. It's 4-44. And so a group home is defined by the state title, shall not house more than 9 mentally or physically handicapped persons, shall provide care on a 24-hour basis and be approved or licensed by a state agency. A group care or congregate care facility deemed to be one which houses between 9 and 40 mentally or physically handicapped individuals, or one which does not meet the requirements set forth by the South Carolina Code for Group Homes. Such facilities must follow the following regulations. Density, and so each facility shall conform with the following standards for lot size and floor area. So for lot size, for the first 12 residents, minimum lot area of 5,000 square feet. For each additional resident, the lot would have to be 700 square feet larger. So the more residents, the larger your lot has to be. And the same in terms of the building itself. For the first 12 residents, you can be 2,000 square feet as a minimum, and then for each additional one, it would have to go up. And again, a lot of this is set forth in the state law, and so it's not necessarily in our control to regulate all these specifics. Over-concentration, in order to prevent the creation of a de facto social service district and to avoid impacting a single residential neighborhood, no group or congregate care facility shall be located within 1/2 mile radius determined by a straight line, not street distance, of another facility. So you don't end up having a cluster of group homes that impact one neighborhood. You know, if you have more than one, that requires them to be spread out within the community. So. Off-street parking shall be provided in accordance with the parking section of the ordinance. And that's, again, based on square footage, number of staffing, things like that. All right, so moving on to, are there any questions about that? All right, moving on to cell and communications towers. So for this section of the ordinance, as a tower, pole, or similar structure which supports a telecommunications antenna operated for commercial purposes above ground in a fixed location, freestanding, guide, or on a building. And is intended to include radio and TV towers and antenna. A lot of this is based off of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. So we won't go through all those definitions. So it goes through your normal building permit process. If you go to the next page, 4-46, and so what we have is that communication and cell towers are located in your C4 General Commercial District, which is the dark red color on the map, which is pretty much just along 176. It's also allowed in your 2 industrial districts, the I-1 and the I-2, which are the light gray and the dark gray colors on the map. Could also be in a planned development or a flexible review district if that was improved as part of their development plans. Existing towers, if there are any that are already existing, have to follow the registration requirements. They have to be spaced out as well. If the applicant proposes to establish a new tower within 1,300 feet of an existing tower, then they just have to submit information that shows that the existing tower does not meet their structural specifications or technical design requirements, or that the space on such tower is not available at fair market value. So what it tries to do is try to get you to co-locate on existing towers first, so that you don't end up with a whole bunch of towers when you can get by without that. Must present evidence that multiple towers, not more than 66% of the highest permitted tower height in such district, would better serve the public interest. The building official shall afford the owner of such existing towers an opportunity for comment before making a decision. So in terms of co-location, any new tower shall be designed to accommodate the principal provider and at least one additional carrier, again to limit the total number of towers. Applicant shall make unused tower space available at fair market value. Shall furnish information, satisfactory evidence that alternative towers, buildings, or other structures are not available for use within the tower site search area that are structurally capable of supporting the intended antenna or meeting the applicant's necessary height criteria, or provide a location free of interference from other communications towers. In any zoning district, existing water tanks, towers, antenna, and similar structures shall be encouraged for consideration of co-location according to the following standard. The maximum height for such is 30 feet above the highest part of the existing tank, tower, antenna, or similar structure. For purposes of this subsection, a tower is not considered a structure on which another tower may be erected. So you can't have a cell tower and put another tower on top of that. What that's really intended for is if you have, like, if Spartanburg Water has a water tank in town, they could attach an antenna to that that's no more than 30 feet higher than that. So you're not adding new structures, but it does allow them to, maybe space them out a little bit in the community without adding a whole new tower structure. That is very common. We have that in several places in Anderson, and you'll see that all over the place. Again, to minimize the total number of new towers, you're allowing them to do this. For the 3 districts where cell towers are allowed, the height limitation for towers mounted on existing buildings, the maximum height is 1/2 the height of the existing building, or 90 feet, whichever is less. So if the building is 50 feet, they can go up to half of that height above it, so another 25 feet. So the top of the tower would then be 75 feet. So again, you're making use of an existing structure to put an antenna on versus building a brand new one. For new towers, the height limitations, 225 feet in the general commercial district. Planned unit or FRD districts would be whatever was developed in the development plan. For the 2 industrial districts, it would be a maximum height of 300 feet. And then all other districts, again, prohibited except on existing water towers, water tanks, things like that. They have to have a business license, painted light gray. A lot of this is just general language, meets the FCC guidelines. Towers that meet the color requirements unless there's other requirements by the FAA for tower visibility. Tower lighting, again, according to FAA requirements. Tower installation shall meet all available FCC rules. All right, setbacks, the yard requirements. Minimum setback, that is the greater of the normal setback of the district in which it's located, or 25% of the tower height from any residential district and/or use as measured from the base of the tower. In the case of a tower or structure on a building, the additional setback shall be measured from the base of the building. No tower, except for a tower on an existing building or a tower located in an industrial zoning district, shall be located within 50 feet of any public right-of-way, public street right-of-way. In all other cases, a tower must be set back from all lot lines other than those abutting residential districts, distances equal to 10% of the tower height or equal to the district setback requirement, whichever is greater. Signage, again, no signage is permitted except as required by state or federal laws. Screening and landscaping. Obviously, you're not really screening a tower because it's 300 feet in the air, maybe, but you're screening the area where all the base of the tower where all their equipment is located is what you're screening from public view. So they have to have an 8-foot high fence, wall, or other device along the interior side of the landscaped area. Evergreen shrubs capable of obtaining a height of 5 feet to be planted, minimum spacing of 5 feet apart. Again, minimum 3-gallon container or 24 inches tall at the time of planting. At least one row of, where am I? Here, I lost it. At least one row of evergreen trees with a minimum caliber of 1 3/4 inches at the time of planting shall be installed with a maximum spacing of 20 feet. So think fence, evergreens, and then some trees around that. Existing natural vegetation can be allowed to be part of that if it is suitable. The building official may waive in whole or part the landscaping requirements if the existing natural vegetation provides adequate screening, or if because of physical constraints or characteristics of the site, the landscaping requirements are not feasible. So if you think you've got a little hill, and then the base of the tower just barely fits on that, it doesn't really make sense to put landscaping below that. That's not going to cover or conceal that. And so that might be one reason that would be waived. The application process, again, they're going to have to submit for building permits, so they'll submit that information to the building official. A long list of information they have to provide, again, based off of FCC guidelines. There's an FCC form, site plans, the engineering drawings of the tower, a map showing their antenna site and other sites in the area to make sure they meet the distance requirements and all that. Written authorization from the owner of the site, if the applicant is not the owner, which most of the time they're not. Most of the time they're leasing a piece of property. A copy of their FCC license, all other information that the building official may determine is necessary to approve the permit.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Who is the building official?
So you're using who now?
Starting March 1st, it'll be CCNI.
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 So you contract with a private group to provide that service for you.
Okay.
The other situation could be, if you didn't have them, it would probably be Spartanburg County. Their building department would be the other answer. If they want to make changes to that, they have to provide a lot of that same information to the building department. We've had that where they've changed out some of the base equipment, the boxes at the bottom of the tower, or where they've changed out an antenna. They just have to provide some of that. The structure is going to be fine, but they still have to go through that process. if nothing else, just so that you know that they're making changes out there, so. Abandonment of use, tower that is no longer used for commercial purposes must be removed within 1 calendar year from the day it is taken out of service. Existing towers shall be registered within 30 days of the effective date of this ordinance. So do you know how many cell towers you have within the town limits now?
I know one.
Yeah, one.
One maybe?
Then the rest will be on top of the existing water towers.
Okay.
What exactly, like the one that's back here on Cleveland Street is not functional, is it? I don't believe that water tower, do they use it?
The water tower is in use, but what's that?
I didn't know they did use, they do use that.
The water tower is in use. And then they also, I believe there's still towers on top of it.
Yeah, I think so. And then the one up there on Memorial Drive, it's not being used.
So if this goes into effect and it's not being used, then the 1-year clock starts?
Yes.
Or they register it?
Well, if it's not being, well, I mean, I think the registration is mainly for you to know where they are. But I mean, I think if it is a tower that is not being used, I would think that 1-year time would start from the date of adoption of this ordinance.
So how do we confirm whether it's being used or not?
You'd have to contact, there should be a sign out there with contact information. They're required, so that some of the signage information is in there. You have to have a contact information, for maintenance, like with towers, we would have to contact them to cut the grass around the tower because it wasn't getting done, in a timely manner.
We have their contacts, I think it's not being used, right? Already confirmed that.
Yeah, it's not being used.
Are we required to inform them of a new ordinance or just in a year?
I mean, if you want it to go away, I would, and just say, hey, we have this new ordinance in effect, that says towers are not being used, have to go away within 1 calendar year. If you want it to go away, I would take that step and inform them so that they know.
It's been more than a year that it's not been used.
Well, this is a new.
Right, so this would trigger a 1-year period because that's the new rule going forward, so.
So in the event that you notify them and a year passes, what happens then? The tower's still there? and
You
it's
write them
not
a
being
ticket as a zoning violation and go through that court process, so. Appeals, any appeal from the decision of the building official may be taken to your BZA, filed within a reasonable time, and that's not a variance, that's an appeal, so that's, a variance is you're asking for relief, an appeal is you're saying that I, as a zoning administrator, have not interpreted the rules correctly, and so there's a different process. The board would hold a public hearing regarding the appeal, notify all adjacent property owners. Upon the hearing of the appeal, any party may appear in person or by attorney. They go through that normal appeal process that the BZA does, and they would make a ruling on the situation. So, so any questions about cell towers? Any questions about heights or zoning districts or anything like that?
Will this make the ones that, like the water towers that are in residential areas, they'll be grandfathered in, we know kind of?
They would be grandfathered in. Again, if they go out of use, they have the 1 year to take them out, but then they could not rebuild one in a residentially zoned area.
So it would be the same like for a house if it was uninhabited for X amount of time?
Right.
Then it would have to revert to that zoning?
Yes, this would give, it's a different time period, so it's a year, instead of the 6 months that we put in with the regular non-conforming uses. So. All right, if we want to move on to mobile commercial structures. So this is sort of, you're building a subdivision, the contractor comes in and brings in an office, mobile office to have on the site while they're doing construction on the property is what this relates to. Defined as a trailer or mobile home type structure which has been or may reasonably be equipped with wheels or other devices for transporting the structure from place to place. Shall not be allowed as a permanent commercial or other business structure within the town. May be allowed as a temporary office or shelter incidental to construction or development on the premises, but only during the time construction or development is actively underway. In no case to exceed 18 months without specific approval of town council. So somebody has a big subdivision they're putting in, it's been 18 months because it's taken them longer to build out than they thought, they would have to go to council, and council could extend it for a further period of time. What you would look at is, okay, progress is being made, obviously you're still building out there, we think it's fine for you to continue. If it's been 6 months and no activities happen, then you tell them, okay, it's got to go away until you start construction again, so. May be located on the property under development or immediately adjoining such property. All access, site size, setback, and yard requirements for a permanent building would also apply to the temporary structure, but in no event shall such structure be closer than 5 feet from a property line. Persons wishing to use a temporary mobile commercial structure will, prior to bringing the structure into the town, secure from the building official a temporary building permit. Prior to issuing a permit, the building official will be satisfied that the requirement is of a temporary nature and all applicable provisions of the town's ordinances and building codes are met. In no circumstances shall it be used as a dwelling place. So again, office only, clearly temporary nature, can never be permanent structure. They have to get approval before it moves in, and can't be there more than 18 months without council approval. So. Any questions about that? All right, moving on to bed and breakfast standards. This is more your traditional bed and breakfast inn. This is not necessarily the specific Airbnb that we're seeing today. Basically, it's allowed in all residential zoning districts. Must be operated by members of the household residing on the premises. Maximum of 1 bed and breakfast inn on any one parcel. Must be operated in a structure constructed prior to the passage of this ordinance. Shall have no more than 12 guest rooms. Shall not require any alteration or change in the essential residential character of the dwelling. Shall involve no exterior storage of materials or supplies. No exterior display or signs except for one on-site sign no larger than 5 square feet stating the name of the inn. Shall provide at least 1 parking space on the property for each guest room. Parking would be behind the front line of the main structure. The resident operator of the inn shall keep a current guest register, including the names, addresses, and occupancy dates of all guests. No guest shall occupy the inn for more than 7 consecutive nights. May only serve meals to registered guests. And the BZA must hold a public hearing to determine if the proposed bed and breakfast inn is consistent with a quiet residential environment. In other districts, the normal zoning requirements apply for bed and breakfast inns. So a commercial district that allows hotels, essentially you'd follow the guidelines for hotels. They may run it as a bed and breakfast, but it would follow hotel guidelines in other districts. Again, the main reason some of these rules are in place is because they're going to be located in a residential neighborhood, and you want it to still appear residential. You want to do anything that makes it look like you have a hotel in the middle of your single-family subdivision, essentially. That's why the signage is small, the parking is behind the house. You have to live on the property, it has to be your residence. That doesn't mean you can't have a main house that's the inn and they live in like an accessory dwelling behind it, or a garage apartment or something like that. That would certainly be allowed under these rules, but they have to live on that same piece of property.
No guests, no more than 7 days? The 7-day requirement, limit there.
Yep.
What if they have an issue? Can they get an exception to that?
By this, go stay in a hotel for a day and then come back and you can stay for 7 more, kind of thing. Again, it's not supposed to be a long-term habitation, and so that's why the limit is in there. I don't know there's just any magic to 7 days. That you see that a lot in these, that is the limit.
I have a question. These are banned from the central business district because you want to encourage hotels, is that? Why?
Right, and you shouldn't have a lot of single-family residential structures in your CBD.
Right.
So,
But I'm just thinking, we do, and we, like, a good example is, that house we discussed last week.
which is not CBD anymore. We switched that to the other zoning district.
Which, it's not on here now. What's
Well,
the
it would fall under hotel rules if it's located in a commercial district. But you can still run it as a bed and breakfast. You know, it could be Tom's Bed and Breakfast, but it would be subject to general hotel rooms. So, you know, these rules wouldn't apply.
Right,
So-
which are much more stringent, that house would probably not be able to, meet hotel rules, I don't know them all off the top of my head.
Right, well, there's a lot of building code things would get involved at that point, so,
What's the secondary commercial district?
neighborhood commercial,
That's neighborhood commercial?
yes.
Okay. So even that, but that's not listed on here. That's allowed.
Right, so,
So what houses?
So you're saying like that house could not be any form of bed and breakfast?
no, so you would look at the neighborhood, let me see here.
Across the street from her.
I think it'd be nice to allow
Do you mind if we,
boutique bed and breakfast type
C4.
without having to have a full-blown hotel or commercial district? To kind of ease into that, we have zero hotels.
And they burn down.
I think it might be nice to be a little more lenient
So we wanted to transition.
until we
transitional zone.
maybe establish ourselves as a destination.
Out of home, to be a commercial work.
at the last planning commission meeting, if you look on your screen, you'll see 191, 181, 161, 151, all the way down to 131. In your new proposed zoning map, those properties end up becoming a central business district. If they were struck by lightning, if they caught fire, and more than 80%?
50%.
More than 50% of the house was destroyed, you could not put a house back at that location. Because it's, at that point, it's a non-conforming use. Right now, it's grandfathered in with the new zoning on there, but if something happened to those properties, if they were burned down, you couldn't build them back like that on those same lots. So what ended up happening at the last planning commission meeting, we discussed having that being, what was the zoning on there?
And we changed it to neighborhood commercial,
Neighborhood commercial.
because neighborhood commercial allows residential uses according to your multifamily standards. So that's anything from single-family house to apartments. So that would allow them to rebuild in place with that change,
I
so.
guess what I'm asking is why wouldn't a bed and breakfast be allowed in the neighborhood commercial?
And so, right, because neighborhood commercial, the way it's written now, doesn't allow hotels either. So we could add neighborhood commercial to the list of districts, or, so we could add neighborhood commercial only, or you could add, say, neighborhood commercial and CBD as a conditional use in those districts, subject to these guidelines or something along those lines, if you want to expand it to non-residential districts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always interested in preserving like the small town feel, so if we gave hotels an advantage in certain areas over bed and breakfast, which I think a bed and breakfast is more attractive for Packlet, I think in the central business district, that would be a great thing to have for a small town.
Yeah, if we could do neighborhood commercial and just add a use as a bed and breakfast.
Yeah, I would take a step further and do the UC or central
NC,
business
and-
district.
Because there are more houses on the other side too, like over where, past Family Dollar, right? Some of those would be part of that commercial area.
Well, those, you couldn't put bed and breakfast. Oh, no, you're right. There is a couple of homes there that, yeah, would either become kind of obsolete as a residence or like.
Yeah, you gotta wait.
On 150, I can think of a few homes. But the other thing, my other question is there a reason that the building has to be existing prior to the voting on the ordinance? We don't want new construction bed and breakfasts?
Again, I think most people traditionally see these as being something you put in an older historical house. And you see them in historic districts, you see them in older areas of the downtown. So that's just sort of, I think people picture that in their head, that that's, when you say, I want to go stay at a B&B, that's sort of what you think of.
Yeah,
is
but
that
we
it's going to
should
be
be-
in an older house.
we should
Now, I
be
have
able
stayed in
to
one that
build-
was brand new construction, and it was really nice. I have in Mills River, and it was really nice, and it was designed and it had good water pressure, and the lights all
I
worked,
mean,
and
yeah,
so.
we should be able to build one with the same small town characteristics, you know, make it, as
Yeah,
opposed to,
I want to give every advantage to small bed and breakfast versus, you know, full-on hotels.
But most likely-
I agree, I picture what you're envisioning, that's exactly what I picture when someone says bed and breakfast, but I don't know if, do we want to be that rigid and say it has to be an old, kind of rundown historic home? Or can it be a newer home that's?
it could be a brand new one that it has certain character, you know, it has to follow, you know what I'm saying, the theme of being, looking historical, having the architectural
Right.
features and that kind of,
Yeah, you get into a whole can of worms though.
Right, it's just, then you're putting in design guidelines and telling them how they have to build their house, so.
What they can do with their building.
So I think you either say,
Highly opposed.
you either just scratch that line out, because otherwise then you're looking at putting in design guidelines into the ordinance as well, that says, you know, and that would definitely extend your timeline.
well, that's.
But, if we come up with that, so.
For an existing one that's out
How far is
there.
that commercial, now that we're looking at that map right there, like, Joe's Tire around the corner, is that part of the commercial as well?
What?
Does that go on or something, not all the way over there? Because there's a house on those sides too, so are we,
What are we talking?
how far does that commercial extend exactly?
Does commercial go on the other side of 150 over to 7111?
Because that little area is really kind of difficult.
So this should be 150 here, Glen Springs Road.
Yeah.
So that runs right through, so here's the property we were talking about last time. And so all this color here is your central business district, and then this color here is this neighborhood commercial. So it extends further down this way, it's on both sides of 150.
Yeah, see, that would be ideal if we could eventually get those, if it's both sides of 150, get people thinking about little bed and breakfasts scattered along there. As long as we allow it, instead of, you know, thinking hotels, I think we could solve a lot of accommodation issues with our existing buildings and then give people the incentive to preserve those old homes and fix them up versus tearing 3 homes down and building some hotel.
Well, that would be conducive to having that park area there and things too, if that's what's gonna go there, you have somewhere to do usually.
I guess if you kept the line of it had to be existing, that doesn't bother me so much. I was more curious why. I could go either way on that really, because it would encourage people to keep those existing homes and kind of fix them up. Because if you want a bed and breakfast, you have to use what's there. I go back and forth.
Do we also have a group home in that district? I thought we had a boys home at one point, and I thought it was right there off 150 on there too. So does that become non-conforming in that district? Because that has, the group homes had to be residential, right, based off of what you were saying here. Does anybody know that for sure?
It's not the home's not actually there. The guy that runs the home lives there. The home's actually a camp down towards Jonesville.
Okay, so nobody resides there for that purpose?
I can't tell you for sure, but I think that's the idea, is that the director lives there, but the home is more of a boys' camp.
Okay.
That's my understanding of it, which is not in Packlet, I believe, but don't quote me on that.
So what are our thoughts on old home allowed for new homes?
That's why you don't talk about it.
I think allow for whatever, new construction B&B, existing home B&B. I mean,
Just bring some business in.
I lean towards Renee's
I don't
appreciate
think
Renee's
Packard's
libertarian.
ready for hotels.
And really,
40 years.
and really
That's
that,
not even a 10-year projection there. That's kind of ridiculous.
and I'm like with Don on the 7 days, you know, you may have someone who their relative is in the hospital and they're up here staying and they may end up having to stay a month or 2 months or something.
In a small town,
And-
it
and-
didn't make sense. It
Yeah.
didn't make sense in a small town in 7 days, because who wants to drive 20 miles to a hotel from here?
Well, I
Or
think-
5 miles, or 10 miles?
I think the concern is we turn into one of those weekly rental, like motor
Yeah.
lodges, and that gets,
Yeah, you don't want a situation where people are living,
Right, living out of house, yeah.
You're
But
basically
there should be
apartment.
something, you know, that they could, in the event that, you know, they are here taking care of a relative or having a reason to be here, after the 7 daes, they could get an extension, I think is what we're talking about.
Right.
I mean, it may be, and I don't know exactly how this ends up going, but I mean, it sometimes ends up checking out of one room and moving into another room, just to the fact that,
Just to get around, that's a lot of
Checking out,
work.
checking in.
That's a lot of work.
I think it should be at least 14 days. I think 7 days is not enough. I mean, people do vacation
Yeah.
for like 2 weeks.
we just have to avoid people setting up permanent residence, as long as it doesn't turn into that.
Yeah, it's not a boarding house.
Can we
So-
hold the person that owns the thing accountable? Like, say that we do have these kind of issues where the people are doing things they shouldn't be, or like they're causing damages to the town, and of course, you know, I'm saying we've actually caught them doing that. Of course, they'll be in trouble, but does the owner then have to be accountable for not allowing those people to stay? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, where we would have an accountability to the owner, like they continuously have this kind of crowd in there?
I think the other issue is like we want to have available accommodations. Like if people just move in and use it as an apartment, then we're back to no rooms available. Like we want that turnover. It's kind of like parking spaces that have a 2-hour parking minimum because you want people not to, you don't want the employees to set up shop. You want something available for the people it's intended for versus new residents. Well, I'm just gonna live here. I don't think we're assuming these people are bad people because they decided to live there. It's that we want available rooms.
Well, I mean, even like if they're only staying for 7 days, and over again, this property's become known for having a crowd of people there that they're just letting run wild. So this property owner over and over and over again has guests staying there, even in the allotted periods of time. And these people have been known to cause a problem over and over. Is that part of what the problem is with regulating the Airbnbs and stuff too?
let me just bring something, just an idea, and Jeff, you tell me if I'm incorrect on this. As of right now, we do not have any bed and breakfasts in the entire town. If one came and wanted to open up a bed and breakfast in a particular area, if everything was what it currently is, it would have to go before the BZA to get allowed use on that.
Right.
And after the BZA approved, if they approved, it'd be okay for them to move forward. And the BZA could end up saying, yes, you can have one here, but we're gonna give you additional guidelines. Can they create additional guidelines when they?
They can approve it with conditions.
Okay,
So-
so then that gives you that opportunity, instead of now hypotheticals down the road, if someone ends up having a house and wanting to make a B&B there, they go before the BZA, and you can add these conditions on there when that time comes, instead of trying to come up with the hypothetical that may or may not come down the road.
I think the other way to look at it too is you have the same tools you'll have for any kind of nuisance business that's in the town. So you've got a bar that's staying open late, there's people drunk outside all the time, they're breaking bottles. I mean, you always have the power to pull their business license. You know, and that, I mean, they would have to have a business license for this, so if there were nuisance issues that arose because of it, you have that ability. It's tough for towns to do that, but if it's enough of a problem, then they can do that, so.
We have laws in place now. I think we have more.
No, it's
noise ordinance. That would just apply to,
Right.
could be used. But another idea to consider is if you guys didn't want to limit, but you entirely the nights, you could say maybe, 50% occupancy has to be turn over at some rate or something. So the whole place doesn't turn into an apartment building. You could go that route, so that you could accommodate people you're talking about that need an extended stay. I don't like a bunch of complicated rules, but you do want it to act as a bed and breakfast. I don't know, have you ever had a town do that, like 50%?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Are most bed and breakfasts that you have dealt with have that 7-day?
Well,
That's very common in there, so,
Yeah.
But it can be more, correct?
yes.
The thing is, people are
I
gonna.
mean, I wouldn't say a month, but I think.
No, because then
maybe
that's a
14 days.
residency.
I don't know that I would recommend
Also,
more than 14 days, but.
Also keep in mind that, Renee has a house and she has a bed and breakfast, and Angelique comes and stays there for more than 7 days. I mean, unless someone complains about that, I'm not gonna know.
It's only a problem when it's a problem, you
Right.
have to enforce it. It's a tool of enforcement when it's a problem. If it's not a problem, who's gonna know?
Right.
So how much, I don't know, I've never stayed at a bed and breakfast, but about how much is it to stay a night in a bed and breakfast? I want to guess it's like 150 a night.
Oh, it really, really
So I don't think
varies.
they're coming to vandalize.
Yeah, I mean, they're usually
And
expensive.
I gladly rent a bedroom in my house now, and cook for them and everything else for
You go to
$150
like
a night.
Cashers, someplace like that, is probably 300 a night.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean, that's
during
what I'm
leaf
saying.
season.
They're not coming here to graffiti.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
it is
if someone wanted
Keep it like it
to
is.
have a bed and breakfast in their house, they're gonna take care of it. They're not gonna let somebody come in and just tear their house up.
Yeah.
right, and that's part of the reason you have to live on the property, so. but-
So it's really not a big problem about doing a bed and breakfast, because the person who owns the house, they don't want their house torn up.
Right, that's even better than a hotel, because a hotel is owned by
And they
a
cook
corporation.
for you,
This would be
all kinds of
first.
perks with the bed and breakfast.
A bed and breakfast.
So 7, 14,
Yeah, because the reason I brought that up was because I've stayed a couple of times in Low Park Stadium in Becky's place, up to 14 days working on a project down there. So
yep,
things like that happen all the time with business.
yep.
And
Yeah,
because the
no one's
hotel
gonna
would
come after you for
move
that.
14 miles away or something like that.
Yeah, no one's gonna come out,
Yeah.
they're not gonna have like bed and breakfast.
We ain't gonna have a
I would
guy
say
come
just-
out and check them out every.
It's gonna be way
Yeah,
nicer.
nobody's coming to look at the guest log.
Yeah.
And so we want to extend it to neighborhood commercial and then the downtown district as well.
That's the thing.
I would prefer that.
Is that going to change the entirety or just those two ends of it, the zoning there? Are we changing, we're not changing the entirety of that zoning, right? Just the two ends are going to be neighborhood commercial now? Are we still keeping the commercial in that square?
Right, the only one that I changed was that one block where we were talking about the house, so.
So on the one with the other houses on there, if we don't change that zoning on that, they can't have the bed and breakfast on the other end either then?
So.
No, we're gonna change the regulation on bed and
You talking about
breakfast.
here on this side of 150?
Yeah,
Yeah, so that would be Central Business District, your C3, so we would have to change this in here to allow that specifically. That allows hotels, but if you wanted to have to only meet the the bed and breakfast standards, we need to add that specific wording in there. So what I would do is I would change it here, in the zoning district, and then I'll go back into those sections and add it as a permitted use, see section, blah, 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 so. Okay.
Can I ask another question? It has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now.
Okay. No.
At the intersection of South Pine Street and Glen Springs Road, there is a church there. And I need to check and make sure, the church is right here on that.
That blue.
In that blue right there. I know about this because one of the members of the church works in a place that I work in.
Do what?
It's Tony.
That should be red.
So that's on C3. That's on your C3. where that
So
church is.
what you want to ask?
So do we have to add that as a permitted use under C3 or is that not?
So, yeah, right there.
This property right here, they're looking to, which is part of that blue institutional church location. They would like to section off the parsonage and sell it as a single-family residence. That's going to be a rezoning, is that correct?
Yes.
And it'll be a rezoning to a residential?
Pretty much it could be pretty much anything other, it could be traditional commercial, it could be neighborhood commercial.
We may want to also look at.
Yeah, because that's, yeah.
See, that's right up on the road there, right?
Yeah,
So the
it's-
problem with that is that whole stretch right there is zoned central business district.
Right.
So if you want that to develop in the central business district model, I mean, you'd be breaking up that block of central business district and adding some other category in there. So probably a commercial category, because that's going to allow the residential as a conditional use, so it would still allow that. But you'd still be keeping it commercial potentially for future users, so. Right, because in the central business district, it does allow residential, but not your standard, stick-built, single-family house on a piece of property. Because what that central business district is, think of your traditional downtown, zero lot lines, you got, commercial on the first floor, offices or apartments up on the second floor. The language that's in that C3 district for residential really says you can have it on upper floors, if you have your traditional commercial building, or on the back, on the first floor, but on the back half of the building, because you don't want the storefront to be a residence, because the storefront is supposed to generate traffic, and so you don't want that right at street level in the front. And so that's why it's worded that way. So it would take a rezoning to some other category that allows that district. So if you wanted it, I think the simplest thing would be to maybe do neighborhood commercial, because then they could still use it for commercial. They could still, if it changed in the future, they could easily convert to an office without having to tear the building down or anything like that, so.
And we don't want to do anything now, it's just,
Right.
just letting y'all know if that would be a rezone when the time comes.
Just make a great bed and breakfast.
Every house is going to be a bed and breakfast.
All right, so the next section, reconsideration of zoning request. Whenever a petition requesting an amendment, supplement, or change has been denied by the town council, such petition or one substantially similar shall not be reconsidered sooner than 1 year after the previous denial. So what this is trying to avoid somebody from being a nuisance and saying, you denied me, I'm going to apply again, and I'm going to apply again, and again, and again. So, which I've dealt with in the past. And so it gives you a little breathing space. They have to wait a while before they can come back and reapply for the same or something that's essentially the same request. All right, administration and enforcement. Zoning administrator, Patrick is the duly appointed zoning administrator amongst his other duties. He's given due authority to administer and enforce the provisions of this ordinance. If he finds that any of the provisions of the ordinance are being violated, he shall notify the individual in writing and basically go through that process up to and including court if necessary. Building permit and a certificate of zoning compliance. No building or structure shall be erected, moved, added to, etc., without a building permit to be issued by the building official and a certificate of zoning compliance to be issued by the zoning administrator. That can be a specific form, or it could just be a letter saying, hey, you meet the zoning rules. They may be combined into one permit for simplicity. No building permit or certificate of zoning compliance shall be issued except in conformity with the provisions of this ordinance, unless a variance has been granted as provided for by the ordinance. Application for the zoning compliance. All applications shall be accompanied by site plans in quadruplicate, drawn to scale, showing the actual dimensions and shape of the lot to be built upon, the exact sizes and locations of the lot of buildings already existing, if any, location and dimensions of the proposed building or alteration. Shall include any other information as required by the zoning administrator to allow them to ensure it meets these rules. Copy of the plan is returned to the applicant by the zoning administrator with any notes, approval or disapproval. 2 copies of the plan shall be retained by the zoning administrator, 1 retained by the town clerk. Those will expire in 12 months. And sign permit, we've already talked about the sign permit language in the other section. Certificate of occupancy is required for any new, existing, or altered use. Unlawful to use, occupy, or permit the use of any building or parts thereof which are created until the CO is issued by the zoning administrator. The zoning administrator shall maintain a record of all COs, and a copy shall be furnished upon request to any person. Failure to obtain a CO shall be a violation of this ordinance and punishable under the relevant section. All right, conditional and temporary uses are declared to possess characteristics which require certain controls in order to ensure compatibility with other uses in the district with which they are proposed to be located. Shall be permitted, subject to a determination by the zoning administrator or the BZA as specified, that the use conforms to all regulations set forth herein, with particular reference to those requirements established for those districts in which they are proposed to be located. The zoning administrator is authorized to issue a temporary certificate of zoning compliance for temporary uses, not limited to the following. So, carnival or circus in your C2, C4, or your industrial districts for a period not to exceed 20 days, subject to approval of the town council. Religious meeting in a tent or other temporary structure in those same districts for a period not to exceed 30 days. Open lot sales of Christmas trees, fireworks, pumpkins, or other similar seasonal or agricultural products in those same districts for a period of not to exceed 45 days. A temporary certificate may be renewed for not more than 10 days, provided it is determined that said use is clearly of a temporary nature, will cause no significant traffic or parking congestion, and will not create a nuisance to surrounding uses. After the use permit expires, the applicant cannot obtain another permit for 60 days within the town of Packlet. Basically, you don't want a temporary becoming, well, I'm just going to keep getting temporary permits and make it a permanent use. That's not what that's intended for, so that's why you have limitations on that.
But you could have separate, so if someone wanted to have a Christmas trees on their property, and that was 45 days, and then later on, if they wanted to come back and sell pumpkins.
Yes,
do
so
it
like
separately.
the mall in Anderson, they've got the plant guy, they've got the Christmas tree guy, they got a guy that does pumpkins, and so it's, they do fireworks out there, so it's different people getting permits, temporary use permits, all on the same property, same address, but that's fine. It's different users, it's different types of temporary uses, so that would be fine. But it can't be, I've got, and we'll talk about things that are not allowed, but it can't be, the guy who pulls up with a bunch of paintings from the back of his truck and be out there for 45 days, try to do it again for 45 days, try to do it again. That's not allowed. Do have some restrictions in here. The following items may not be considered temporary uses: art sales, vehicle sales, or clothing sales. Vehicle sales, your car lot, do follow the car lot rules. Art sales and clothing sales can kind of get junky, and so you might not necessarily want those out there as temporary uses. We've found those to be problematic at times. That's why they're not allowed in there. So that's clearly up to you whether you want to keep that language in there or not, but that's based on problems that I've seen with those types of uses in the past. So, any thoughts on that section? We kind of got it down to a science after a while because we had the same people coming back year after year. The fireworks twice a year, New Year's and 4th of July, the same people that we dealt with year after year with the Christmas trees and things like that, became a really good system because people were used to it. They had all their paperwork in order, they knew what they needed, and off we went. And so hopefully, if you have people who come back, it becomes an easy process, so. All right, right, non-conforming uses, we talked about those the last time, it's in here as well for enforcement. Any structure lawfully in existence and operation at the time of this ordinance that does not conform with all requirements of the ordinance shall be permitted to remain in use. However, again, such use or structure shall be brought into compliance with all requirements of this ordinance if such use or structure is altered or enlarged, or if damaged to an extent that repair would cost greater than 50% of the replacement cost of said use, or discontinued for a period of not more than 6 months. Nothing in this provision is intended to prohibit routine maintenance and upkeep of any building and grounds. Again, for the specific regulations, see the section we talked about last time. But again, you have an existing non-conforming use, it's fine, but you cannot add on to it. You cannot expand it because then you're making the non-conforming use larger. That's not allowed. If it goes out of business for 6 months or more, it's got to go back to what the district says. If essentially burns to the ground, you can't rebuild it as a non-conforming use. So it's all the same language we talked about last time.
So I have a question about that, because I know we talked about it a little bit last time. I'm sorry to bring the question back up, but when we were talking about residential parking, and when you build your new homes on there, we would have to have the parking paved and things on that. So, for instance, I know we talked about the empty lot that's up there that burned down and whether, but there's been another incident up the road, there's a fire, and I don't know exactly how much damage, but if it's over 50% damage on that property, thank you. If it's over 50% damage on that property, when they do go to build that back, are they going to be required to put parking on there? Because here's the thing, you got insurance will cover the house, but you're not going to have an insured lot.
really it's about the house in that case. So, that house is a legal use on that property, right? It's owned.
Yes.
So the non-conforming doesn't really come into it, it's really just about the house.
Okay, so that
I
would be
say.
new
If I were
construction.
enforcing it, I'd say, go ahead, rebuild the house and let's move on. So,
Does that sound fair?
now, if you completely, so the example that you had was the auto parts store, where they basically scraped the parking lot down to the bare dirt. Okay, you've taken that completely away, and so the new improvement that you make, replacing that parking lot, had to meet your current guidelines. So, but you took that whole parking lot away. That didn't mean you had to rebuild the building if the building was non-conforming still, but the part that we're dealing with has to come into compliance. So now, when that house goes away completely,
When O'Reilly's moved in.
yeah,
O'Reilly's came in and their building was non-conforming. If they had to build that brand new based on our zoning ordinance, they have to build it up by the road. But it was already in that location, the parking lot was already there. However, they didn't like the parking lot and they wanted to replace the parking lot. Once they removed the entire parking lot, they had to abide by the zoning ordinance.
right.
If they would have left a portion of the parking lot in there, it would have been a repair or some sorts there, but then it probably, I'm not sure if you would have gone by the 50% because that's more based on the building itself. But once they tore up that parking lot and then wanted to put in a new parking lot, they had to abide by our ordinance, which you've seen the bike racks that are on those properties. What's that?
But just for the park.
But just for the parking lot.
Right. And so your house example, the bigger issue with that might be, do they meet setback requirements? And so, you might then say, all right, you're having to tear this down now because it's damaged more than 50%. You're basically demolishing the house. If you build that house back, it's going to meet your setback requirements. And I don't know, it may or may not have already met it, but you'd be looking for that when they submitted their new plan. So that's more likely for me to say, you have to do the driveway then versus you can repair, it might be substantial repairs, but you're still making repairs to the structure. You can go ahead and do that without me really worrying about it too much, so.
What about if they build on additions? So an addition's built on the house. I know that, like, even though, if we do the property in the back or everything has to be a certain percentage of the house anyway, but additional building, will that prompt something where you would have?
So if you're just doing an addition on a house, I would just review it really for setback requirements.
Okay, so it wouldn't be like you're going to have to pave and put?
Now,
Okay.
you're building something new,
Yes.
then you might have to do something different there, so. All right, complaints. Whenever a violation of the ordinance occurs or is alleged to have occurred, any person may file a written complaint. Basically says that the zoning administrator is required to investigate those within a reasonable time and take action as required by the ordinance. He may delegate enforcement action to an authorized employee or agent of the town. So, Patrick as his zoning administrator might have the police go out and do something. He designates somebody like that. Penalties for violation. Any individual found violating any provision of this ordinance shall be charged with a misdemeanor. Each day the individuals are found to be in violation of a provision of the ordinance shall constitute a new offense. So, if you're not getting anywhere, you could technically write them a summons every day it's in violation. You don't usually do that because you're trying to solve it as peacefully and as quickly as possible, but you do have the big stick in the ordinance that would allow that to happen.
That covers like houses that are falling in and trees are on them and stuff?
Yeah, it could be something like that, or junk cars, or whatever, is not allowed by the ordinance, so. Nothing herein contained shall prevent the town from taking such other lawful action as is necessary to prevent or remedy any violation, including but not limited to the seeking of injunctive relief through a court of law. So you have rules, but other rules could still apply. It is the intention of this ordinance that all questions arising in connection with the enforcement of the ordinance be presented first to the zoning administrator, and that such questions be presented to the Board of Zoning Appeals only on appeal from the decision of the zoning administrator. So basically, it's a due process question. Patrick makes a decision, Tom doesn't like it, Tom can't go straight to court, he has to appeal it to the Board of Zoning Appeals. A person can't go straight to the Board of Zoning Appeals without going through Patrick first as a zoning administrator. So you have to go through the proper steps in order to do those things. So.
Well, is there any time reference to this? Because like when you were talking about complaints, it says that you must investigate within a reasonable period of time.
Right.
Well, my reasonable period of time and yours may not be the same, and
usually
that's
within-
how things just never get done,
Right.
because nobody ever.
Usually, it's hard to put a time in because if something is a life safety issue, your deadline is today or tomorrow. If it's something else, 30 days is probably a reasonable time frame. The problems that I have seen over the years with enforcement activities is not on the city's behalf, it's once you get into a court, and trying to schedule courts and working with judges, because judges don't work on the town's timeline. We had plenty of issues where the judge would let stuff go and we're like, what are you doing? I've been working on this for months and you're going to give them 30 more days, and so that's usually where I found the hiccups are.
It's like the time when the person came and was talking about the drainage from those houses over there, Emerald built. Has that ever been taken care of? I know that we have sent them letters. They have actually done it. Okay.
Right.
But that was a long period of time from the time it was made known to the town and when it actually got done.
Right.
They were trying to build an additional house, and we made it clear that before they would get permits for that additional house, they had to fix this other issues, and so they took care of it.
Okay. But had they not had to do that, it would have probably been even longer. Yeah. That's my concern, is just someone, I mean, if you have a developer to come in and they do a plan and everybody looks, and it looks great, who's watching them to make sure that they are adherent to this plan? Because a developer will tell you anything, and we know that from Callis Anderson's issues.
Right, I mean, so CC&I is going to deal with the building stuff, the county's going to deal with subdivision and drainage and the engineering parts of it, and so they should be doing inspections as you go through the process, on making sure they're building the roads in the right places, that they're building the detention ponds according to plans. DHEC could be involved if it's, if you have issues with silt fencing and things like that. Yeah. And so there's different people that are part of that process, that are trying to make sure, when you have a smaller town that doesn't have all that staff internally, then you're having to work with other parties to make sure that's getting done. But, so that's really who would be here in Packlet for those various issues.
And in that particular case, the town would have to issue a certificate of occupancy on that, based on this new system.
Right.
The town would have to have to provide a certificate of occupancy
Before they can occupy the
for
structure.
before the subdivision, before it would be signed off.
Well, the certificate of occupancy is really for a building, so before you can inhabit a building. But as you're going through the process, somebody's got to approve the road construction, somebody's got to approve the water lines and sewer lines and all that. And then there's going to be a CO for every individual house that's constructed in a subdivision. And so you're going to have those pieces each step of the way that should be addressing all those potential items, so.
And then what'll end up happening is typically, the developer doesn't want to take care of the roads for the rest of their life, is they want to build it to the standards and the town agrees or doesn't agree to accept them.
Correct.
So those may be some other opportunities to get things fixed or taken care of.
So the new company, the CCI people, they will be the kind of the watchdogs to see that these things are being done during developments.
There'll be the RCI.
Yeah, but they're gonna be the ones that are gonna make sure that they're doing, like, you know, we had the Emerald houses, and it wasn't caught that the drainage was messed up until after they were finished with the building, so, you know, well, I guess I'm asking, is there anybody gonna go out and just periodically check to see if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing?
So like Spartanburg County would handle like detention ponds and that sort of thing, right? So they would be, should be inspecting those as they go along.
Well, we
To make sure
know
that they're built according to the plans.
Yeah, well, you know, Spartanburg County is a big boom right now, and they do not have the staff to go out and do that. So I assume that's why we're using CCI to help us make sure that.
CCI is going to provide whatever services you contract for them with, and I'm not.
They're primarily going to be building inspections, so in terms of site plans out there, they may assist with that if we would like for them to on a case-by-case basis. But unfortunately, it'll probably end up being myself who's going out there and verifying stuff gets done. So if y'all see something out there and y'all already do this, is call me up and say, you know, what's going on with this, what's happening with this, and we'll verify and check back behind. Eventually, we get to the point where the town has enough people and revenue and various things that the town can end up hiring somebody just to do that.
All right, moving on to the Board of Zoning Appeals. You already have a Board of Zoning Appeals, so this just sort of addresses, and I have a question to make sure I have this right. You have 5 members on the BZA? 7. 4-year terms for the BZA?
Thank you.
The dark.
I was about to get her out.
Keeping them in the dark.
Treatment like mushrooms.
Thought we were part of that Green New Deal. I was like, we can't have no electricity. I think what
currently-
he's asking is like, who's gonna look over the
Currently, BZA is 3-year terms.
3-year term.
infrastructure stuff, like the sewage?
Water sewer is
Because-
taken up by the Spartanburg Water Sewer.
Well, like she said, though, we had that problem over on Fuller Street with Emerald Homes, which was a disaster.
Is that stormwater though?
Who's supposed to be overseeing those type of things? Because it's not gonna be the building permit people, CC&I.
No, what ended up happening on that
It's
particular...
just like here, like they said about Anderson, that did, you know, wasteful spending. And we wasted all that money paying that guy, and nobody, you know, the biggest problem with that was nobody was overseeing it. We're writing checks, but nobody's, the building's right there. Why was nobody?
We didn't have a private inspector.
Yeah, the county was doing the building inspection at the time.
Well, but we were writing checks.
There was
Writing checks.
there was no town administrator at the time.
But I think that's the question is,
Right,
who
yeah.
oversees these things that affect the neighborhoods? Not that house, I mean, you can't put it on the permitting company, right? So who oversees that? We can't have the county do it if the county's not, I mean, we're not using the county anymore.
You'd still be using them for like stormwater and
For stormwater,
road
yeah, for-
inspections, things like that.
So
I believe is the Department of, not the Department of Natural Resources, it's the Department of
Environmental services.
Environmental Services. It currently administers the retention ponds and the storm drainage that's out there. But that particular project, the county was the one, when that project first started, I probably should not do this, it was not built to your zoning standards. So your zoning ordinance, it's already in place now. But when those site plans and all that kind of stuff came forward, it did not match your zoning ordinance.
And it really, from what you had told me, that it was a lot of just oral agreements.
There was not anybody that was checking behind what they were doing, and they submitted stuff and were able to just move forward. And so back then, when a builder wanted to build something, they just got a sign off from the clerk, and then once that was given to the building inspector and at the county, they were good to go. There wasn't enough, there wasn't someone who was here kind of going through and verifying the fact that it was being abided by your zoning ordinance. There weren't site plans that were being provided for someone to check through and make sure this is what I'm planning to build, and then once they're done, you didn't build it the way you're supposed to be done, so we're not gonna sign off on it being done. There was nobody, I hope I'm not saying anything I'm not supposed to.
No.
But I mean, you have to have somebody to do that. I mean, it wasn't something that, I mean, at that point, you did not have a CCNI or an RCI. You had the county, and it still got done. It still got missed. You'll have.
So it falls back on us. We have all these people working for us, so it falls back on the community to contact Spartanburg when we have council members and all these people working for us, but it's still, I don't understand how it falls back on us in the community to have to make these phone calls and say, hey, this is a problem, Spartanburg, come on out and take a look at it. Why are we having to do that when we have putting out so much money on, not to be, but you guys, why do we have to do all the extra work?
Well, we could hire another contractor and up taxes.
Well, could we not
You guys pay for
negotiate
it.
in our
But-
contract with CCI?
You can add that
To be
on there.
that- to
But
be-
what'll end up happening is your zoning administrator will end up being that person who verifies that their site plan matches what they actually built. And going through that entire process. That did not exist, as far as I know,
No.
before.
Right, but it does now.
Yes.
So we're asking who's going to be the watchdog, and you're saying it's going to be CCI for us?
No, it's gonna be the zoning administrator, which is Patrick.
We're just gonna write tickets.
It's going to be, at the end of the day, it's going to be my responsibility as your zoning administrator / town administrator. Now, what will end up happening, and this is when our CI was here, we would go through and look at site plans together. At the end of the day, it's my job to sign off on it, but I work with them because they're the building inspector side of there as well. And we would work together and go through the entire thing.
And see, before, you're talking about the people having to go and complain about it, but you didn't have anybody to go to then, but you call Patrick or, and get him to look at it, and instead of, not doing anything, and having to call Spartanburg County or anything, he would do the call.
Well, sometimes trying to get a hold of people is impossible. You leave messages, they don't return calls, it's a headache. And you have your own job to do, so now you're also the zoning administrator on top of your regular duties, so, that doesn't make much sense.
In a town this size, you won't have as much as you think going on a regular basis. Now, once the town starts seeing a lot more of this stuff, the town should be in a situation where they can afford to hire somebody on to be able to be the zoning administrator. And what'll probably end up happening is you'll end up hiring a planner And so in towns that are a little bit bigger than the town of Packlet, they have a planner on staff that their job is to go through and verify all this stuff on a regular
And they would
basis.
also be like the zoning administrator? The
Yes.
planner would be, okay. Does that answer your question, Kim?
Yeah. As long as somebody's watching what other people, these people are doing.
I mean, we currently have,
I just don't want them to come in here and throw up these little stick houses like they're up on 176 that you can tell that are not, I mean, they might look nice today, but they won't last. And we don't want that. We want, if we're gonna improve Packlet, we want it to be something that's gonna last and be quality.
In that section there, does it say how they're appointed, the 7 members?
the Board of Zoning Appeals shall consist of 7 members who shall be citizens of the town of Packlet and shall be appointed by town council for 3-year terms staggered, so that 1/3 of the members shall have any vacancy in the membership shall be filled for the unexpired term in the same manner as the initial appointment. The appointing governing body may remove a member for cause by a majority vote of town council upon written charges and after a public hearing.
Okay. All right.
Did I provide you the information?
Yes, that's fine. All right, meetings, procedures, and records. The BZA shall elect a chairman and vice chairman from its members who shall serve for 1 year or until re-elected or until a successor is elected. The board shall appoint a secretary who may be a town officer, an employee of the town, or a member of the board. Meetings are held at the call of the chairman and at such other times as may be determined. All meetings of the board shall be open to the public. Minutes shall be kept. So decisions, the concurring vote of 3 members of the board shall be necessary to reverse any order, requirement, decision, or determination of the zoning administrator, so an appeal, or to decide in favor of the applicant on any matter upon which it is required to pass under this ordinance. So if you have 5 people present, 3-2 would win it. If you only have 4 people present, 3-1 would win it. But you still always need at least 3 yes votes in order for, well, you have 7, so I'm gonna change that.
I was
to
gonna say 4.
4,
They
yeah.
have to-
So I wrote that when and I thought you only had 5, so 4 members. So if you have 4 members present, everybody has to vote in favor for something to be approved or an appeal to be overturned. So
we'll have 5 members?
the BZA has 7 members.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I thought you had 5 when I wrote this, so.
So it would just be the majority. So if there's...
Right, but it's,
Gotcha.
if you only have 4 people present at a meeting, that's a
It has to be
quorum.
3.
It has to be 4.
The mid-
So 4, since you have 7, 4 is the number now.
Yes.
But if you have 7 people present, it can be 4-3 and pass.
Yeah.
If you only have 4 people, that's a quorum, you can conduct business, but the vote has to be 4-0 for something to be approved.
Not
So it's
4.
saying you have to have 4 votes, not a majority of who's present. So it can't be 3-2 when you have 5 people present, it always has to be at least 4 votes by that language, so.
Okay, interesting.
So even if you had set it up that you said you wanted to call a meeting, or the chair wanted to call a meeting, and knew 3 people who would show up for that meeting, for that special chair meeting, that you would still have to get all 4 of y'all to have to vote in favor of that.
Right.
Without the others being...
Is to keep the chair or a majority of the group from kind of doing something, I guess, nefarious or something like that. I mean, it's to make sure that you're going to have 4 votes. It's not just a quorum of the people who show up. Or a majority.
All right, appeals, hearings, and notice. Basically, any person aggrieved by any officer, department, board, etc., may appeal a decision to the board. Appeals should be within a reasonable time as provided by rules of the board. We've talked about that a little bit before. Zoning administrator would send all the information to the board. An appeal stays all legal proceedings unless there is a life safety issue. In such case, proceedings should not be stayed otherwise than by a restraining order. The board shall fix reasonable time for the hearing, have to give 15 days public notice. Any person may appear in person or by agent or by attorney. So again, that's an appeal, that's different than a variance.
Do you have anything, was something explained earlier, is there anything explained for the planning commission, or did I miss that already?
No, this is just, because this is administration and enforcement, it's just about the BZA.
Okay.
So,
Do you not need to have something that says anything about the
no,
planning?
the planning commission has their own rules and procedures that they adopt separately on their own.
That was in our comprehensive plan for the planning commission, right? Like
But it-
the layout.
But the planning commission should have adopted rules of procedures that govern how you rule, but that's a separate document that you would approve.
In our zoning ordinance now, the planning commission is mentioned in here, and the BZA is mentioned here. Do we need to, if we end up adopting this, does the planning commission then go away? So-
No, because there's something in the city ordinances where you created a planning commission years ago?
I don't think so.
Okay,
I think it's only in the zoning ordinance.
okay, I'll look at that
It
and
didn't
see.
outline it.
It's typically not in there, but,
What's that?
It didn't outline the stuff in the comprehensive plan, like it
No.
didn't outline the authority in that one? Okay. Yeah, because I don't think it is in our municipal code either.
okay. Typically what happens is the town passes an ordinance to establish a planning commission. Talks about, like, some of that language that's in there, talks about how many members, how they're appointed, whether it's by, wards or, council districts or, at large, whatever, terms and all that. And so, but then you're just governed by your rules of procedure and state law. So, but we can look at that and add that if you want, so. So powers and duties of the BZA, hear and decide appeals, hear and decide appeals for variances. But that doesn't mean you can give a variance for anything. This is where a lot of towns get into trouble. And so this is right out of the state law regarding what you can do for a variance. A variance may be granted in an individual case of unnecessary hardship if the board makes and explains in writing the following findings. A, there are extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property in question because of its size, shape, or topography. So a physical condition on the property. The conditions do not generally apply to other property in the vicinity. Because of these conditions, the application of the ordinance to the particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property, and the authorization of a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property or to the public good, and the character of the district will not be harmed by the granting of the variance. Board may not grant a variance, the effect of which would be to allow the establishment of a use not otherwise permitted in the zoning district. So you can't say, car lots are allowed in general commercial, but not neighborhood commercial. You can't give them a variance in neighborhood commercial to allow a car lot. That would be illegal. The fact that the property may be utilized more profitably should a variance be granted may not be considered grounds for a variance. In granting a variance, the board may attach to it such conditions regarding location, character, or other features of the proposed building, structure, or use as the board may consider advisable to protect established property values in the surrounding area or to promote the public health, safety, and general welfare. And so I have a lot that I can subdivide into two smaller lots and I can make more money because I can build two houses on it. That is not grounds for a variance. If you want to do that, get the property rezoned, go through that process, get it rezoned to a district that allows what you want to do. That should not be grounds for a variance. I'm thinking of the Mill Hill where there's been questions about cutting those lots into smaller lots so that people could build more on there, and then what you have is not really in keeping with the development of the Mill Hill. That should not be a variance. That's what your rezoning process is for. So change it to a zoning category that allows that if you can get that passed by council. And it also means council has to approve it, not just an unelected board, an appointed board versus an elected group of commissioners. To decide on other such matters where a decision of the BZA may be specifically required, In exercising the above powers, the board may, in conformity with the provisions of this act, reverse or affirm wholly or in part, or may modify the order, requirements, decisions, or determination, and to this end shall have all the powers of the officer, so this is again an appeal, from whom an appeal is taken, and may issue or direct the issuance of a permit. So Patrick looks at the site plan and denies it because he doesn't think it meets the requirements of the zoning ordinance. They appeal that to the Board of Zoning Appeals. They find that Patrick made a mistake, that it does meet the requirements. They can require him to issue a permit saying that it meets the requirements of the ordinance. That's what that gets around to. The board may subpoena witnesses and in case of contempt may certify such fact to the circuit court in and for the county of Spartanburg. An appeal from a decision of the Board of Zoning Appeals. So Patrick makes a decision, denies them. The Board of Zoning Appeals upholds that, says Patrick was right. The applicant can then appeal that to the circuit court in Spartanburg County. That has to be done within 30 days of the date of the decision. If it's 31 days, it's not a valid appeal and the case is closed. All right, and that is for that. And then I have one other thing to discuss here, which is the other individual piece of paper that I handed, that we passed out at the beginning of the meeting. And we've talked a little bit in the past about like a little neighborhood store in a residential district. That's something that we might want to look at. I had this growing up where I grew up. I thought, it was great at the time. You could walk right down to the corner and there's an old house that became like a little convenience store. And so what I have here is language that would make this a conditional use in your single-family zoning districts. Conditions being no larger than 2,000 square feet, may not be located closer than a half mile to another retail use in residentially zoned property. You don't want this to sort of become a commercial district in the middle of a neighborhood. So similar to the group homes, you would require them to be spaced out. No off-street parking is required. Most cases, you're gonna, your kids are gonna ride their bike to the little store and buy candy, or you're gonna walk over from your house and get your gallon of milk or whatever. Question about whether you think it would be useful to limit hours of operation. Ground illumination only for signs. No fuel pumps allowed. Most people think convenience store, they think the 7-Eleven with the store and gas pumps. That's not what this would be for. And then BZA approval would be required to determine if it's compatible with the area. That gives the neighbors an opportunity to speak and say whether they want it, that kind of thing. And then we would add a definition in the definition section that details that. Any convenience store, any retail establishment offering for sale prepackaged food products, household items, newspapers and magazines, sandwiches, and other freshly prepared foods, such as salads for off-site consumption. So it's not a restaurant where you go there to eat, but maybe I can go and get a sandwich or a salad and take it home, And so, any thoughts on that language? To add that in.
Sorry, let's say it was a little ice cream shop. How rigid this off-premise or off-site consumption? If there was a little ice cream bar, they have to step out on the sidewalk, or I guess it's not a huge deal. I'm just wondering how.
What I think you would not want to see is like tables and chairs set up outside. If you're in there and you're standing up and you're eating it, and then you can take it outside and walk. But it's it's the way it's worded. Sandwiches and other freshly prepared foods. So I don't think that would necessarily have to be. You have packaged foods, which could be ice cream. You could freshly prepare ice cream. So I think that ice cream use could fit under there. But again, it's not really intended to be a sit-down type of restaurant type environment.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. I was just thinking if it was like a
Pelican.
that had a sidewalk, table and chairs. That would be cool. But I don't. Would that open a huge can of worms? Maybe.
Again, I think ice cream might be secondary to a store that sells other stuff, the way this is currently worded. And so, if I got a little convenience store and I sell ice cream out of a cooler, that might be more in keeping with what this is, rather than just a standalone ice cream shop only. Because then you're a restaurant at that point, because that's all you do is a restaurant type use. So
That's what I say, Pelicans would be too commercial, even though it's a smaller thing and stuff, and you walk.
By this definition, I think yes.
Okay.
So,
As far as hours, you're asking for input from us. We limit anything else in the town? I mean, it would seem like this is appropriate in a neighborhood to have a limit. I'm just wondering, do we have any other regulations as far as hours that we could maybe base it on? That anyone knows of? We've got a- Yeah, noise. That might be a good place to start.
This is in a residentially zoned area?
yes, so it'd be a conditional
Okay,
use.
well, I think there needs to be a reasonable time for closing them, the hours.
Yep.
8 or 9 PM would be,
Well, in the summer, I mean, it doesn't get dark till 9:30.
oh, that's a little extreme. I mean, at 8:30,
But that,
like 8:30.
I mean, it doesn't even get dark, is what I'm saying. I mean, it'd be nice if you wanted to go on an evening walk and get an ice cream or something.
Well, I mean, even the 150 store, they're closed by what, 10 o'clock? There's just not enough business to have the 24/7 store open and the other one. I don't, and how many people are going to be walking around in the resident area at that time of night anyway? And
Right, well, the business would have to adjust to what its business is getting. I'm saying, we're talking about what we're going to enforce on.
well, that's what I'm saying. I don't think we're gonna have, I don't think we need to put enforcement on it. I think it'll do it on its own here. I don't think that's like a,
I mean, there definitely should be a limit, I think, but it may not be an issue. I mean, some guy wants to put a 24-hour, I mean, that in a residential neighborhood, I wouldn't mind it, but a lot of people would.
So what's the noise ordinance?
I think it's 10.
All right, so if it's 10, they shouldn't be allowed to be open past 10. Which I think is kind of late because
That's
I'm in bed at 8, so I'm like a 5-year-old.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's kind of reasonable.
So you're talking about something like a small building
Right.
in a residential area? Because I remember when I was a kid, they used to have, people used to sell stuff like candy,
Yep.
cookies, stuff like that in a residential area. But they did it out of their house. So this is, you're talking about a building, a small building?
I think what you would likely see is a house that gets converted over to something like that, because I don't know that it would be worth it for somebody to build a new building to do that sort of thing. Yeah, in my background, what I'm used to seeing is exactly that. It's a little, single-story house or something where the ground floor turned into a little store and the owners lived upstairs on the second floor kind of thing. So that's sort of what I picture in my head. And so, they had a few canned goods, some milk, candy, stuff like that.
kind of like.
Is this a need?
Remember,
I mean, is this a need here?
The idea is to kind of bring back that little soda fountain, bakery, cafe, neighborhood grocer feel, allowed at least. Maybe it's not needed, maybe no one uses it, but I'd like to give the town the opportunity to have that again. I think it's super valuable to a community and a neighborhood, and we've kind of lost it, we've zoned it out, made it illegal. And I think it would be a really unique asset
Something like
that most
that.
towns don't have. The fact that it could
And again, they had to go before the BZA for approval, so there's going to be a public process before it starts in any particular location.
I have a convenience store.
Just by zoning it doesn't mean it's,
I don't like it.
just by zoning it doesn't mean it's going to happen. And as much as I
Allows
like,
for it.
one thing I think it'd be better to do, I love the idea because I've lived in Midwest communities that have this. But you may consider when that time comes up, that we have that conversation with the property owner and we go through BZA and we try to make that work instead of going through hypotheticals that may never happen between now and
Right, I
then.
agree.
We gotta do something, because at more little stores, it's gonna be more trash.
Don't get me wrong, I mean, they need something over here in the Mill Hill area because there's really nothing. Where I am, there's everything. But they need a little something here, but I don't think in a residential area like in with the houses is the best idea, but maybe like over here, when this building, the cloth room is done, put a little something in there. I don't know.
Renee.
I don't know how people would feel about having,
Well, that's why you had to go through that extra step, and you have that public
BZA,
process,
yeah.
so that everybody would have an opportunity to comment on it. You're gonna go, you're gonna post a sign out there saying there's a public hearing, everybody will have a chance to speak about it in, any particular location. And so you have that extra step that people will have to go through. So it's not just a rubber stamp where it's a permitted use and I can't stop you,
Yeah.
But what's the
there's a
difference between
process.
that and just not having it in there and just having it approved through BZA?
Well, doing it this way, where you have it as a conditional use, you get to list out some particular conditions.
Okay, I
And
got
so
you.
you have, I know if I follow these and go and then get approval through the BZA, I know I have, some certainty that this is the process. Versus if it's just, yes, and the BZA has to do it, then you just have questions about, well, I'm going to approve it for you, but not for you, even though you're very like circumstances, and then that causes issues.
But if you don't put it in there as a conditional use, it wouldn't.
Right now,
be-
it's
would
not allowed at all, right?
It would not, but it wouldn't even be allowed through as a variance in the.
Right, because that would be a use variance at that
Yes.
point.
Okay.
Which we just said you cannot do, so.
well, like I said, I think over here, you need something over here. And you gotta post, like,
Yeah.
right here would be great. This area, right surrounding the town hall, would be a great place for like a little convenience store. Up the street on Stone Street, not so much, but I mean.
But that's
Well,
what-
that's what, I think this little store here, do they sell?
But I think this
soda?
is what's, is the best of both worlds, because you end up, as a conditional use, someone can look at that and say, oh, there's a possibility, but I still have to go through the BZA. If you don't put it as a conditional use, it doesn't matter if we want you to or not, you cannot do it.
That's my questions though, because that's what we were talking about
Justin, do me any
last time.
favors,
Talking
call
about,
this a
so-
convenience store.
And in the 20.
Yeah, I know.
We're selling it, we're not gonna have a QT or a 7-Eleven move in, there's no gas pumps, there's no
Right.
parking. This isn't gonna be this is gonna be like a bakery with some, a little grocery, some produce, some canned goods. This is gonna be like a very
I understand.
family-friendly, neighborhood-friendly, quiet little hole-in-the-wall, like we used to have everywhere. If up on Stone Street, if it's on the back lines, no one's gonna see it, it may not last. Who's gonna wanna put it there? But, allow people to give it a shot. There may never be one of these go in because it's very radical. But if we can start zoning the way the town used to be, the way people used to, people tell stories about it, it's wonderful, it's great, well, it's illegal now. Well, this is our opportunity to make it not illegal anymore, whether it ever happens.
Yeah,
Yeah, like a general store, a bodega or something, or a neighborhood market is a word I prefer to.
well, we
We could call it a general store or
But we
something.
talk
you know?
about these, people tell these grand stories about, these.
Which is cool
We
in a
can have
city,
them
but
again.
how many people live in Packlet? If you put something like that right here, can this community right here support that?
Well, then it'll close.
Huh?
Well, then it'll close. And then
That'll be
Yeah,
for
which is
somebody to
unfortunate.
decide, yeah.
Yeah, but give people, business people the opportunity to try.
Would these conditions
I'm not
allow for
opposed to
this
it, I'm
down
just
here?
saying.
Like the 2,000 square feet, is that strictly the store? And because they're selling feet, because I know you brought that up last time, like this one's going to be this is going to be non-conforming down here now. And so if they were to reduce their space that they sold things out of, and it was less than 2,000 square feet, does the whole building have to be, or just the actual store area itself be the 2,000? Because that's a bigger
That's a
building.
good question, because 2,000 seems a little bit big for the store, but the building maybe not. If there's a second floor where the owner resides, then that seems reasonable. I would think the 2,000 is for the whole building, but I don't know if that's what you intended.
It's intended to be the whole building.
Okay,
The way
so
it's written now would be the whole structure, the floor area of the structure.
would they then, with all the things that they have going on down here, would they fall under this conditional use, say they are approved by
They're
the...
already sort of grandfathered in as a retail use, so this wouldn't specifically apply to them unless
Unless it
burns
switched
down,
hands or...
they have
yes.
to rebuild, then we would find the best category for them to do something there, so.
You recognize that guy?
All right, that is all I have for tonight, as we've gone through the whole ordinance.
I have a question.
Okay.
And it's not really to do with this, but it is houses. Lighting on houses. How many lights can a person put on the back of their house? I got the Superdome behind my house right now. Yeah, they bought the house behind me, cleared all the trees, put one of those, the pole lights, which is fine. But now they've got like 10 floodlights back that way. You come in my driveway and the whole back of my house is lit up all night. I got a crack house over here, I got the Superdome over here, and now my other neighbor over here decided it's a trash heap. So every room you look out of it.
Don't forget about the crosses.
I mean, the only language that we put in for lighting, you have some conditional uses that talk about lighting, but just on a single family, there's not any language in there that addresses it. The only thing that you could possibly address it off of would just be like a nuisance complaint if, their lights are shining in your bedroom window and you can't sleep kind of thing.
The whole area, they've got more lights than a Walmart parking lot.
Yeah.
I literally have to put my visor down when I pull in my driveway and think it's so bright I can't see.
We are,
I'm glad
Daniel
you brought this up.
Cross, he's got a
It's
flood
not-
light that's
I meant to mention
angled
this,
upward.
it's on this topic.
I'd like more lights, the less
What are you talking about? It's literally
crooks are gonna come.
Yeah, like a little spotlight or something.
Look at that one over there.
Because you don't want a whole flood of lighting, this business lighting up the whole neighborhood.
Right, I agree. We don't want the lighting down.
Yeah.
Well, usually what I'm thinking of is you have,
Those
you have a little sign and you got a little spotlight on either side.
There was clock scales on
Yeah,
it.
like a little ground sign or something.
There was one over here going towards Dolly Rogers was Miss Spakes. I mean, back, when I was little, they had this little.
Like a dark sky type
And
thing.
we walked to them, and we had a lot more grocery types, and like right there where the.
Well, that's probably, you're talking commercial lighting, I'm sure. is what you're talking about,
There's
but-
like a.
Yeah, I can think of that, that's fine.
That used to be John Reeves ice cream, they sold hot dogs and ice cream there.
But I mean, you could have a little hanging sign, put the little lights that shine down on it like that, or there's a ground sign, two little spots. It's not really shining up very much. Again, picturing something in my head, what that might look like. So, likely this is just gonna have a little sign on the wall with probably no light,
Like something we have where I was from too would be a lot of international.
So, are there any more? It's coming. You just wait.
We, in Greenwood, we have a great
I don't know if that applies.
shop. And
It's
they,
a lighting section.
Are there any more
I don't go
comments?
back much, but.
Are there any more comments?
But they have.
Get it, girl.
Are there any more comments?
No, ma'am.
Did you want to go ahead and?
No, ma'am. I make a motion to adjourn.
I second that.
Hold on. Do we want to vote on this? 'Cause
I want to go over it again because I know there's things that we've talked about and I don't remember. I'd like to read, is this the last?
I'll
this is the
have to
final
send you,
draft?
I'll send you an updated final draft with correction from last time and tonight, so.
Yeah, I'd like
There's just things that we've gone over and I don't remember voting on sections and I'm not comfortable with it and I don't want to say, yeah, let's vote. And then,
You couldn't vote until you get the final draft anyway.
So what we're looking at right now is March 10th is your next meeting. And the plan right now is that at March 10th, you would have a public hearing and you would have your meeting. And at that meeting, if you chose to vote in favor, it would be recommended to council, town council. Then if y'all recommend it to town council and it's just approval recommending, am I saying anything I'm not supposed to? Then it would be April 3rd, council would have their first reading, and then in May 1st, they would have their second and final reading. So after May 1st,
so we'll vote on this March 10th.
that's correct.
Okay, one question. Where in here can I find like the ordinances about like the animals and stuff? Like we talked about chickens and stuff?
So basically, the town has rules regarding chickens, and so I took that out as not being allowed, and it's just subject to the town's, because that's in your code of ordinances, not in the zoning, so.
Okay, so I just know we talked about it. I looked here and I didn't see it.
Yeah, there's just so much that we discussed, and I know we
Right.
voted on a couple of things. I just want to make sure that we're all
Waiting
satisfied before
on
we...
everything, right? We
We've
didn't-
had issues with no quorum and everyone's here, so I just want to make sure it doesn't like get kicked into next year if we just kick it down.
Well, I'm not going to
Airbnb.
vote if I'm not comfortable
What was,
voting on it.
what did we decide about that?
So I'll get a cleaned up copy back out to everybody, and that way you can look through it, redline it, you know, if you have questions, you can email me, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have, so.
And I strongly encourage y'all, so we don't continue, and if y'all end up taking longer, I mean, if y'all, I get it, but if you can, take your time, go through this, redline it, make some comments, email Jeff, let him know, so at the next meeting, y'all can potentially go ahead and vote based on those changes and move forward. Because keep in mind, we still have 2 more readings of council, and council has, the y'all's meeting have changed. It used to be before a council meeting, now it's after a council meeting. So in the past, it would take basically 2 months to approve something, now it takes 3. Does that make sense?
So our next meeting's the 10th at 5:30.
March
correct?
10th at 5:30.
When's the public hearing?
That'll be the same meeting.
Same day.
Same day.
What time? Following it?
Five.
Is there a time?
5:30, so we'll have at 5:30, we'll have the public hearing. And then as soon as it's over with, you'll go right into your meeting. Now, I could set it up so that your meeting is not till 6 o'clock, but what may end up happening, because we have this happen a lot, is no one shows up for the public hearing, and then you're just sitting around waiting.
Yeah.
So I would
I
much
just want to
rather,
make sure we have time to discuss this before we vote on it. If anyone has questions or, you know, I think that's fair. So the 10th, 5:30.
March 10th, 5:30, there'll be a public hearing, there'll be a chance for, it'll be out to the public. The public can make any comments they'd like to make on here. Then you can have a chance to make some updates if you need to, is that right? And then you make your motion to approve or table. But if you motion to approve, then council will then have 2 readings and we'll be done through this in May.
So everybody got their homework.
Yes, ma'am.
So we
Are you
got,
going to print out copies so we can pick them up, or?
What I'll do is, I'll send you a PDF copy on the computer, and then usually what I do is I get a couple copies over to you bound for the public to come and look at it here. And you can post that PDF copy on your website, put it out on Facebook. I usually give like 2 copies that people can come in here and look at it, not take with them.
Depending on how quick you are, I'll be in COG Wednesday.
Okay. Wednesday next week?
This Wednesday.
Maybe.
It's easier for me to read this.
But I'll try to come down and take some.
Yeah. Okay.
And if we need to, we can have some printed. We can always print some in-house.
I used too much ink.
Didn't we already
I don't know,
adjourn?
Kinko's doesn't exist, Office Depot.
No, we gotta adjourn.
Y'all got any other things?
so are there,
Go ahead.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thought we did that.
I'll say.
I second.
I third.
meeting adjourned.
She's